I'm at Musconetcong Mountain Preserve today. It's in Holland Township. It is a rainy day, but we're continuing the virtual tours. It's on the northern slope of the ridgeline and offers a walk through hardwood forests. But if you're coming from the west, the sign does not stand out because it's behind a brush line. Try to remember the gun club as a landmark, and then you're almost to the park. Coming from Little York, you'll have no problem seeing the sign, and we'll move up into the parking lot and head onto the trail to continue the tour. Okay, the trail does open up, but it is a little brushy at the start from the parking lot. The parking lot can hold about 5-6 cars if parked correctly. The red trail is about a mile in total length out to the far loop. There is a white loop about halfway out, but it does offer a connection to the trail system with the Regal Ridge property. So you do have the ability to set up about a 2-mile through hike if that's one of the things you're looking to do. Again, it is a walkthrough mostly of a hardwood forest and offers some history in an old homestead as well as an old Christmas tree field. One of the things done by the rain is it brought the night crawlers up to the surface. Worms do play an important part in the ecosystem. Without worms, the ground would be very tight and compacted from all the tread that occurs on it. It's the night crawlers that loosen the soil, that provide the space for the roots to grow, for the air to get into the ground, for the moisture to get into the ground, and to be taken into all the plant material. Without the worms, again, ground would be as hard packed as the pavement we drive our cars on. And it's one of the fields of nature that has been overlooked much. And if you're looking to become a soil scientist, knowing worms is actually a great advantage and an area or field of study that researchers are needed in. I know I talked about Grapevine back in the old Jugtown walk, but these show some nice curls and growth up into the trees and interlocking with the branches up there. This vine here is probably close to 60 to 80 years old, and next to it is another vine coming out of the ground, climbing up into the neighboring tree, and again showing interlocking. And if you can catch it, there's an arc actually reaching into the next tree. And this vine is probably maybe about 10 years older than the second one. But again, just some nice growth in these woods with the vine structures that exist in the parks. Way back in the beginning, I talked about a wind throw, a pit and rim at the Westcott hike, showing that when an old tree falls over, it pulls up soil and creates a spot where new vegetation can start growing. What I want to point out on this one is this young cherry tree. And you can actually see where it comes out of the tree. It makes a 90-degree angle and then starts growing up towards the sun. So this tree is actually not actually in the ground per se, but in the mountain root structure of the fallen tree, and yet it's already probably grown about 5 feet and about a ½ inch in diameter. So it just shows that nature doesn't wait for decay to truly occur. As soon as an opportunity is made, nature will fill the void. Okay, a short distance from the parking lot, we hit the old driveway access. We never got the easement where it came out to the roadway, which is why we had to put in a private lane or parking lot for the park. But also a short distance on the other side from where this intersection occurs is one of the pond on the property. And I'm going to pause the video until I get closer. Okay, this is the only standing body of the water on the property. It is great for frog habitat. Very hard to sneak up on them. Usually what will happen is you'll hear or see them jump just before you're ready to start looking for them at the edge of the water. You can see by the duckweed that there's really no current here. It does sort of drain, and you just heard some of the frogs jump, hopefully. It drains when it overfills and falls into a little creek that you step over to get here. But along with the frogs, since it's really the only permanent water source on the property, other wildlife do sort of seek its edges. A couple of species of birds and even some mammal tracks can be found in its vicinity. I freely admit I don't know my mushrooms. I will try to look this one up when I get home. But this is actually sort of a colony growth with the reproductive structures of the mushroom coming to the surface. It's actually existing in a few different spots along this tree, and I think it's actually growing in the ground per se and not the tree itself. But again, the caps of the mushroom, as I stated, are the reproductive structures, and their job is to come to the surface when it's time and create the spores for the mushrooms to spread its seeds or the spore to new locations in the woods. 90% of the mushroom is actually underground and is unseen, and that's actually what's doing the decomposition and creating and returning the nutrients to the to the soil. A little further down from where the pond is, you'll find a second blue trail that may not be on your map. The purpose of this trail is it's a diversion that cuts over to one of the corners of the white trail, and I will be taking it and cutting back to the main trail just to get into different corners of the park for this walk. Tonight might be a walk showing off some different mushrooms. I'm pointing this one out because you can see that the cap has some divots and marks in it. And just to show you again that mushrooms are just not for people, but they are also used for wildlife as a food source. Again, another one here showing the chewing up parts. And again, this does not fully damage the mushroom in the sense of its existence, because as I stated in the other slide or the other video, much of the structure is underground in the roots, and this is just the part that exposes itself to the surface again to release the seeds. We'll tip this one over to see what's underneath it, and again, if you can get the detail, there are actually tiny little holes, gills, in the white flesh. And they are the area of the mushroom that the spores will eventually come out of. Stated, there's a little creek crossing when you do the spurs to the white loop. It does have a nice little drop through some stones where you head back to the main trail. Always a place to check out to see if wildlife is taking advantage when it's flowing. But I have seen it bone dry. But again, it's just one of the areas you check for diversity of wildlife in the area, because whenever you do add water, wildlife potentials in regards to sightings do increase. It's also just a pleasant spot to sit and listen to the brook as it babbles and flows over the stones. Okay, this tree in front of me is an understory tree that I did, I believe, during the Arboretum walk. It's called Dogwood. It's an opposite structure, which means whenever it branches or leaves, there is one right opposite it when it makes its branches and leaves. I mean, hence the name opposite structure. So they always come in pairs. But the reason why I'm pointing it out today is you can actually see that we're entering the time period with our plant material for the trees where seed production is beginning in full force to get prepared for the end of summer, the fall, to disperse their seed and fruit to try to create the next generation of trees. These are called a drupe because the stem actually goes all the way through the fruit structure. They will brighten up at some point and become red in color, and then disperse with the aid of wildlife to hopefully pass through their system and create a new tree where it's deposited. The other bud at the tip of the branches, if it's not making fruit, sort of gets like a little mushroom head. And these are the buds that will become the flowers on the dogwood trees. So again, it's still a time of action for trees. And again, getting ready to create the dispersal of their seeds. Okay, best seen in the winter time when the leaf vegetation has died back. But about 2/3 of the way down the red trail is the old housing site. The house is gone, but the foundations remain, as well as some side structure foundations of the old spring house, smokehouse, or sheds. I'm not quite sure what they used to be, exist to either side of the trail. So if you like to see a bit of historical past history of the park, the remains will offer you those sites. When you get down to the end point on the red loop, the trail does curve into the woods. You can still see that it needs a bit of a cutback for the season, but the lane does continue in a different direction, so you need to be aware of that. And notice that the yellow border signs have kind of changed and reflect that you're seeing now Holland Township property, because this lane does continue into the trail network of the trail at Regal Ridge. Regal Ridge does permit hiking of both properties, and you don't have to just be a Holland Township. You just have to respect their rules and park on their property to visit them where they indicate. But again, it does offer that opportunity. Otherwise, again, you continue on the red loop, return back towards the top of the trail, and head back up the trail to where you parked off of Ellis Road. As indicated with the dogwood, other trees are in their reproductive cycle as well. Down at the loop of the red trail, I found this walnut tree, and up in the tree you can find the nut forming. These are giant husked nuts, can be over 2 inches in diameter, but probably more average about 1.5 inches. Be careful if you pick them up, because they will stain your hands if you handle the flesh of the husk. You need to dry walnuts in nature to actually make them edible, because there's a chemical tannin in the husk that will stain not just your hands but also the blades you use to husk the shells. Wildlife, however, can break through these in about 30 seconds. I've seen chipmunks and squirrels both do it in about that time. But again, be aware that not all plant materials flower or make their seeds in the heart of summer, but also do it towards the end and into the fall. Okay, the trees are not the only thing that's making fruit right now. As much as we don't like seeing this plant, but this is Multiflora Rose with its rose hips. Again, it's a droop structure like the dogwood. You can see the tip of the stem coming through the end of the fruit structure. But again, these will eventually turn red. Again, they are edible if you clean them, and they can actually be a source of vitamin C. But again, by making the fruit late in summer into the fall, the young seeds, when they disperse, don't have to compete with all the fresh growing vegetation, and can hopefully land someplace where they will have the benefit of growing into the adult plant material. And I will jinx myself by saying that I hope many of these do not, because again, Multiflora Rose is not native, but again, the drupe is eaten and used by some of the wildlife. Hopefully this is coming out for you because my image is dark, but here in the tree you can see how it's been exposed to the interior, and this is a tree that was hit by lightning and exploded. What you can see also is that it didn't actually kill the tree, because the interior of a tree is dead. It's only the first ½ inch or so, and you can see how the bark has wrapped around on the interior and is growing inside the tree. Because what it's trying to do every year as it grows is close this hole until it meets the other side. Unfortunately, that's probably never going to happen, and ultimately the tree weight will eventually cause this tree to fall over if we don't take it down as a safety hazard first for being adjacent to the trail. But again, evidence of nature showing that a lightning strike occurred and that the tree didn't actually survive the hit.